Hey everyone, I'm Tanya from My Fancy Design Shop, and today I'm going to show you some of my favorite ways on how I make my lettering stand out in this year's summer creative retreat. So grab your favorite lettering supplies and let's get started.
First, I'm going to show you some of my lettering pieces, just to give you an idea before we start on a project. So here with Art Show, I did a marker blend, and what I like to do with brush markers is add an outline and a shadow just to make it stand out a little bit more. And then you see that I have kind of like a bubble letter with brush lettering. It's actually faux lettering, and had it interlace a little bit. With Protect Your Piece, I like to add some flourishes just to cover in some of that empty space. And then the next ones, I kind of did like a sticker background. I thought that was fun to make it stand out. My favorite pen to use is the glazed jelly roll. And what I do is that's literally the last step. The one with Celebrate, I did use a metallic pen to go around the sticker outline. And I thought it was just fun. For Be Kind and Unwind, I did some teardrop details around it, as well as a glittery outline on the lettering and the sticker border. You can always change up the composition with curved lettering, go on an angle, different sizing. Here I did brush lettering and block lettering, and I had the letters overlap so I can get a really cool blend with that. And then here's an example of a longer quote. Changing the style and the sizing is always great. And this one is offset lettering, which we're going to work on later on. One of my favorite tips is if you have an iPad and Procreate, I like to go in there and design my lettering piece and then import it into the Trace app and use it as a light box. I do have some free lettering templates you can download. You can print it out and then use a light box as well if you don't have an iPad. But here what I'm going to do is put my paper right on top, and I will have to pause this video really briefly because I have to make the room a little bit dark for it to show up. But what I'm going to do is use a light gray brush pen. I like to use a Tombow N95, and I'm just going to use a bullet tip and just trace it. Now that I have it onto my watercolor paper, I'm just going to zoom in just so I can see where I'm going to have my letters interlace and what part of each letter is going to come basically in front of the other. So I am just going to go with my light gray brush pen and fill in the word summer, just the downstrokes, because basically what we're going to do is create a guideline for our brush pens and our watercolor. Pretty much what I like to do is when I do color blends and things like this, I like to literally color in my letters. I always have a guideline. I prefer using a light gray brush pen because I don't like to erase pencil lines. That's just a personal preference. If you prefer to use a pencil, feel free to do that. But here I'm just going to use light gray brush pen, fill in my downstrokes, and kind of emphasize the areas where the word summer and the downstrokes is going to be on top of the word endless. You'll see in a little bit when we start adding our markers in watercolor. Again, like I said, if you don't have an iPad or Procreate, that is perfectly fine. You can always sketch out your design on paper. Sometimes I'll do that because, let's be real, I sometimes forget to charge my iPad. So sometimes I'll get a bunch of scrap paper, sketch my design out, and then use that as a guideline for me to reference back to when I draw onto my actual paper. Or sometimes I'll get my light box out and I'll just trace it that way. So you do not need an iPad, you do not need Procreate or the Trace app, but if you do have it, it is helpful. Okay, so we are almost done, and what we're going to do is grab our brush pens and we're going to work on the word summer first. So I really want to do some summery colors and do a color blend. Sometimes I like to plan out what colors are going to go first. I had an idea, but I did mess up and I mixed up two of the colors, which is fine. I made it work. And then I'm just going to use some handmade watercolors. This is Slay All Day from Wits Watercolors, my favorite gold one. And that's going to be for the word endless. But we're going to do that after we finish summer. But right now we're going to activate the watercolor. I like to do about 4 drops of water on it. Now the main tip when doing interlacing lettering is to add a little bit space in between where you are going to add your markers, where you want your watercolor to be looking like it's on top of it. You'll see in a little bit. So I am also going to be using a very thin paintbrush. I'm using the King Art Original Gold Liner. I really like how it's really thin so you can get really detailed. And I am using sketch marker aqua brushes. You can use any water-based brushes. As long as you can activate with water, you can use it. So I am basically coloring in my letter right now. And as you see, I left a little space because that's where I want the watercolor to be on top of my lighter strokes in the word summer. So I'm adding some of the pink, and then what I'm going to do is add in my other color, yellow. After I add in my color, I'm going to grab my paintbrush with a little bit of water and just go over everywhere that I added the marker to. This is to activate the color and to blend the colors together. I do like to do this right away and work letter by letter so my marker doesn't completely dry all the way. It's just a little bit easier to blend the colors. And then also, it's so I don't smudge my marker. If I work letter by letter and I'm right-handed and I work from left to right, it's less likely for me to smudge it. And you just want to take your time. There is no rush. Right now, this is all real time. Later on in the video, I will have to speed it up just a little bit because it was getting a little too long in the workshop. But you notice that I left the space for the watercolor on the top of the E when I was curving around. And then I'm just going to work with the two colors and try to blend it as best as I can. You also can grab the marker and kind of color it in if you need a little bit more of that color. You also don't want to put too much water on your paintbrush. So you can tell that up in the top of the S by the E, it kind of started blending in together, but that's okay. The watercolor is going to go right over it and cover it up, so we don't have to worry about it. And then now I'm going to work on my next letter. So I'm adding that coral peach color and my blue, and you're just going to repeat this step until you're done with the whole letter. I will say this is where I messed up with my color combo. I wanted to start with pink, coral, yellow, and blue, but I mixed up the yellow and coral color. So I had to blend the blue and the coral, which was a little bit tough, but as long as you keep working with it, and later on when we added the outline and the shadow, it really pulled it in together, so it worked out. But don't give up. It's sometimes you just got to keep working through it. Now, all of this is real time. Later on, I had to speed it up just a little bit because I was running out of time for the workshop, but it's always best just to take your time. Work letter by letter. If you have to walk away from it and come back to it, that's perfectly fine. Also with blending, you don't have to use a paintbrush and water. You can also do marker on marker blending. So say if I did that with this letter M, I could have put my purple down and with my pink brush pen, kind of just drag the purple color down and then turn it into pink for my next stroke. When coming up with color combinations, you can grab a piece of scrap paper and just kind of pick colors and see how they blend with each other, whether it's marker on marker or with water. Sometimes you can have the colors be right next to each other, or you can leave a little space and get maybe like an ombre gradient effect. It's really fun to see the different ways that you can blend colors. And I think this is a really great way to make your lettering stand out. Instead of just using one color, if you have a color blend, it's really eye-catching. Okay, we are almost done with this word. I know it's taking some time, but also you want to make sure that you're leaving spaces where your watercolor letters are going to overlap. If you do have a little space in between your watercolor and your marker and it's not quite, we'll say, touching each other, we can go back, and you will see me go back with the marker just to fill in some empty space. But after we're done, before we add any of our shadows or outlines on summer, we want to make sure it's completely dry. So I will be using my heat tool just to kind of go over it a little bit to ensure that nothing is wet. And you will see me using a paper towel and putting that on top of the lettering where I'm going to lay my hand down when I add my shadows so I don't smudge them. We are finally done blending our word summer. I think I'm going to work on the word endless with my watercolor before I add my shadows and outlines. So what I'm going to do is just kind of mix in the water with the watercolor and activate it. I am going to grab a piece of paper and I'm just going to make sure it's the right consistency. And what I'm going to do is every once in a while when I pick up more watercolor, you're going to see me kind of tap it or wipe it a little bit on that paper. It's because I don't want a big glob on my paintbrush. So here you see me grabbing my paper towel. I'm just going to actually rip a piece off, and I'm going to lay that right on top of my word summer so I can lay my hand on it and not worry about smudging it. And then I'm just going to carefully paint in the word endless. And then I'm just going to make sure that it's going over the areas where the gold is going to be on top of my brush lettering. And then I'm going to make sure that I don't go over the areas more so of my downstrokes in summer, so it looks like it's interlacing. I think it'll all make sense once you see me do it. So here you're going to see me go over the thin stroke of my letter S, and then I'm going to skip a space and then finish out the letter E on the other side of my downstroke. So now it's looking like the words are interlacing with each other. Take your time. It is okay to take your time. You don't have to rush through this. Sometimes I can catch myself doing it, and then my letters are different thicknesses, they're wobbly. So here I'm just going to take my time with each stroke, pick up a little bit more paint, dab it on my scrap piece of paper, and then continue on. Some of these lettering pieces, the more components you have with it, whether it's, all the details, the blending, different techniques, mediums that you use, it's going to take some time. A lot of the videos that you see on social media are sped up. And I know when I got into lettering, I didn't realize that. I thought people were just working that fast. It was that easy. It's okay to take breaks. It's okay. Sometimes I'll catch myself walking away from something and then coming back, because I know that if it's taking too much time, I'm going to start rushing. And then I'm going to end up probably restarting it. Okay, remember when I said sometimes there might be little gaps between your two words? I'm going to go back with my brush marker and kind of just fill in those gaps just a little bit. And then I'm going to grab my handy dandy heat tool and just make sure that my watercolor is completely dry before I work on the shadows of my word summer. Because I used my heat tool, my paper started to curl up a little, so I'm just going to use some washi tape. This is one of my favorites. It's Lettering by Karen's rainbow tape, which actually you're going to see me run out when I'm trying to rip that second piece of paper. But I made do with the little tiny piece that I had. Now it's time to work on the shadow for summer. So I'm going to grab my gray brush pen by Karen Markers, and as you can tell, this is one of my favorite ones. It's almost out. And then I'm going to add a black fineliner to it. So I'm using King Art Incline pen. I wasn't sure on the sizes, but I ended up using the size 08. And then to add some glitter to it, I am going to use the Pentel Sparkle Pop pen in gold. These are one of my favorite glitter pens. I really also love the silver. So first we're going to do our shadow or drop shadow with our gray brush pen. I always like to picture my sun coming from the left, so my shadow's to the left and the bottom. But if you want to come from the right, then it would be the opposite. Your shadow would be on the left and the bottom. So it's really personal preference. Right now I'm going to start just drawing in my drop shadow to the left of my strokes and on the bottom. And right now it might seem a little unfinished. That's okay. Once we add our black fine liner to it and our little pop of gold, it's all going to come together. Also, if you don't have a glitter pen, that is perfectly fine. You can use your black fine liner. Don't even have to use black. You can use a different color. Gel pens work, metallic pens, whatever you have. Once we're done, what we're going to do is grab our fine liner and we are going to do a close shadow. So basically what we're going to do is kind of draw along the edge of our brush pen stroke. So this line, this black line, is going to be between your actual blended lettering and your shadow. So now I'm just going to draw in a very thin line in between my blended lettering and my shadow. And this is just going to make it stand out a little bit more. You do have the option, you can outline the whole thing, which I think really makes it pop. I chose not to. And then later on, I decided to go back and thicken up my shadow, my black shadow, just a little bit. I quickly grabbed my paper towel. I forgot to use it when I started on the S. I did not want to take the chance at all that my lettering will be smudged or on my hand or anything. I know that we dried it a few times, but sometimes it still can smudge depending what brand you use or how many, saturated you made the paper. I just didn't want to take the chance. Now, as you can see, it's really starting to come together. The word summer is really starting to pop on the paper. And what I sometimes like to do is take pictures throughout the stages just to see the difference between when you started and how you finished. So we're going to be finishing up the black outline soon, or the shadow. And we're going to grab our gold glitter pen. Again, if it doesn't have to be gold, I always like to use silver as well. It can just be a metallic pen, regular gel pen, a colored fineliner, whatever you want. And what we're going to do is now on the other side of the gray shadow, we're just going to outline that side with the gold glitter pen. So you can see here that we are just outlining the other side of the gray shadow, and this is just going to make it stand out just a little bit more. Quick rundown with the word summer and what we did. So we have our blended lettering. It's also interlacing with our other word, endless. And then we have our gray shadow along with the thin black shadow, which could be an outline if you wanted to do that. And then added a little bit sparkle with our gold pen. Now I wanted to add something to the word endless. I wasn't sure if I wanted to use the gold pen or the black. I decided on using my black fine liner and doing a very close shadow to it. So again, I'm staying to the right and the bottom of my letter strokes, and I'm just going to kind of do a little thin outline just to make the word stand out a little bit more. Now, do you remember earlier in the video how I said a lot of the calligraphy or lettering videos that you see on social media is sped up? This is actually sped up 2 times because it was a little bit long, my whole entire video, so I needed to kind of cut it down a little bit, but I wanted to show you the whole process. So if this is 2 times, imagine how slow I went in real time. And by working this slow, it's perfectly fine. You're taking your time, you're enjoying the process, and less likely you're going to make a mistake. Whenever I rush through it, I tend to get very sloppy. Sometimes I'll try to fix it, and other times there's no fixing it. But again, go slow, take your time, enjoy the process. We are almost done. One of my other favorite things to do to make your lettering piece stand out is to add splatters. I love adding paint splatters. It does get very messy. I think I attempted to make it a little bit cleaner on my desk by using that little paper towel. It did not work. But I like to add a few more drops of water to my watercolor, and I'm just tapping my paintbrush right over my watercolor paper and getting some splatters on there. And we are done with our first project. Now we're going to work on our second one where we're going to do offset lettering, and I'm going to show you how to overlay watercolor onto your letters. So I'm going to grab my watercolor paper and my brush pens, and I'm going to letter out the word summer in big block letters. They are not going to be perfect, and they might be, different in size, they might be angled, and I'm definitely going to have them overlap. I just want you to have fun with this. So don't worry about having your letters being perfect, the same size, the same angle. I think it's a lot of fun and makes it stand out even more when they differ in size a little, when you have them angled, when you have them overlapped. If you remember, the first lettering piece that I showed you is Celebrate and had kind of like that black sticker outline. I had my block letters angling. So one was angling left and then the next one would be right. And I just think it's really fun when they're staggered. You can also change up the style of your letters. So it started to look like I'm using all uppercase, and then I decided to use a lowercase e, more so because I felt like it would fit better between the M and the R. But again, everything does not have to be the same. You could change fonts or styles, sizing, and angles. Next, we're going to add a sheer kind of glitter overlay to our letters to make it sparkle. I like to use a hollow paint. So I'm using Wits Watercolors Ho Ho Holidays. If you have a glitter paint, hollow paint, anything will work, but you really want it to be diluted. So I added about 4 or 5 drops to my half pan, let it activate, and I'm just going to probably pick up some paint, dip it in my water, and then kind of make a little area of paint on my magic palette that I have there, and just keep going back into that versus the half pan, because again, I just want it to be pretty sheer, just enough that you can see some of the glitter. And then again, I forgot my paper towel, so I just put it on there again so I don't smudge my colors. I think this is a fun way to add some sparkle and glitter to your lettering. And here I'm just kind of showing you what it can look like up close, and you just want to continue this process until you're done. And sometimes when you activate your brush pens with the water, it can also add some color blends. So here I'm going over the U, and you might see some of the blue go into it. Again, this does take some time, but it is a lot of fun, and I love the outcome of how it looks. So again, take your time, don't rush through it. Make sure your paint is always pretty diluted, almost transparent, so you don't get that thick. So I know with some hollow paint, especially this one, it can get very opaque, which is great for just lettering. But because we just want a little bit sheer overlay of that hollow look, we want to make sure that it's pretty transparent. So there you saw like kind of like more of a glob that I had on. So I dipped my paintbrush into the water and then just kind of moved that glob around the E and spread it around so it became a little bit more sheer. We are finally done with this part. And then we're going to work on the offset lettering. But here's a quick close-up of what it can look like with that watercolor on top of brush pens. Again, using my handy dandy heat tool to just speed up the process. And now we're going to do offset lettering. So basically the easiest way that my brain can process this is with a pencil, draw in your drop shadow. Again, this is 2x speed because it was taking too long. It will not go this fast for you, I promise, because it does not go this fast for me. So I'm just drawing in my drop shadow. So I'm going on the left of my strokes and on the bottom. And what we're going to do is with the black glaze jelly roll, I'm going to then finish out the offset lettering. With your glaze pen, we're just going to trace over the pencil marking of your drop shadow. And then here on the very end of my S, I'm going to draw a straight line and then draw my bottom shadow, and I'm going to connect those two. And that connecting line is going to be over your marker. You're going to do the same thing here and have that connecting line go right on top of your marker. Now that straight line that we added, we don't want it to be the same length of your marker. You want to kind of like stop halfway or a little bit more of your marker because we want that connecting line to be on top. I promise you, as you move on with each letter, it's going to make sense as you do it and almost become automatic. Because our letters are overlapping or touching each other, sometimes the offset lettering might do that as well, and that's okay. I think it just makes it look fun. Again, just stick with the whole having your drop shadow, doing your straight line, and just connecting the two lines together. And it'll all make sense, I promise. I know for a while offset lettering really challenged me, but as I just thought, okay, as long as I have my drop shadow and make that short little straight line, I just got to connect the two lines together. And it'll get easier as you do it more. We're just finishing up this design. We have one more letter to do. And I just think this is a fun way. We started with basic block lettering, and as we added some sheer, hollow overlay to it and offset lettering, it's really making it stand out. And these are just a couple ways on how I make my lettering stand out, with interlacing letters, color blends, shadows, offset lettering. If you give any of these projects a try, I would love to see them. So be sure to tag me on Instagram at My Fancy Design Shop, and I'll see you next time.